Bibles. Ecclesiastes chapter 5. Some have called this the most difficult book in the Old Testament, but I don't think that's the case. I think sometimes it's misunderstood because of Solomon's failure later in his life and getting involved in pagan worship. Some have thought the book of Ecclesiastes is a gloomy book. A book talking about the senselessness, the hopelessness, the vanity of life. Written by an old man who is so disillusioned with life. But that's not the case. Solomon says he's writing words of truth and words of wisdom. He's an instrument that God is using to explain to us how we can live life skillfully. Because of sin, God has put the whole creation under the curse, His judgment. That means there is pain, there's suffering. Our work becomes toil and labor, and life is short. Because we are here for a brief time and we're gone. So Solomon's talking realistically about life. And he's not sugarcoating it, as we say, but the reality of life. But he wants us to understand that God intends us, even with the difficulty and trials, to enjoy life. Now, foundational to everything for understanding this book of the Bible, as well as any other, is a relationship with God. The beginning of knowledge and wisdom is to know God. If you don't know Him, you don't have a beginning. In fact, in chapter 2 of Ecclesiastes, verse 25, for who can eat and who can have enjoyment without Him? The God from whose hand everything comes. And that's crucial. Chapter 3, verse 1 said there is an appointed time for everything, and there is a time for every event under heaven. So as we have come to know God and entered into a relationship with Him through faith, recognition of our sin and guilt, and the salvation He provided in Christ, we understand that He is in sovereign control over all. The good things and the not so good things. The pleasant things and the unpleasant things. God has appointed the time and the events in that time. And that puts things in perspective. Chapter 5 opened up in the first 7 verses with drawing our attention in a more detailed and emphasized way our responsibility to God. You'll note the end of verse 7 says, rather, fear God. That summarizes in a concise way what has been repeated. You must recognize that He is God, that He is sovereign over all, and in His sovereignty He controls all. He is the God to be honored, to be worshipped, to be listened to be obeyed. And so these first 7 verses talk about our relationship with God. This is the most important, the most serious thing relating to our life under the sun. This physical life we live day by day. We are to fear God, and that involves, as he's talked about in the first 3 verses of chapter 5, we come to worship Him. That means at heart we come to bow before Him and listen to what He says. The chapter opened up, guard your steps as you go to the house of God, as they would go to worship the tabernacle. Draw near to listen. rather than to offer the sacrifice of fools. That becomes evil. How terrible it is. People come thinking they're worshiping, and they're really doing evil. We come before God and listen to what He says. That's why we come and open the Bible, which is the Word of God, to listen to what God says, to understand it, and be ready to obey it. And then in verses 4 to 7, he says that our relationship with God is a personal relationship. And we recognize the importance of that relationship. In our physical relationships, God says our word ought to mean something. That when we give our word, we ought to honor that. How much more in the personal relationship we have with the living God should we keep our promises? That's what vows were. We talked about those in our previous study. And he says here, when you make a vow to God, don't be late in paying it. Vows were voluntary. We looked into this a little bit in our last study. This is reference from the book of Deuteronomy. They were voluntary. You didn't have to make a vow. But once you made a vow, you were obligated to fulfill it. So when you come before God, you get caught up in the emotion of the moment or something like that, and so you decide to make a vow. You understand you have obligated yourself now. So you take your relationship with God seriously. I mean, He is God. Keep that in perspective here at the end of verse 2. For God is in heaven and you are on earth. Be quiet and listen. Let your words be few. This is about God and what He has to say. Notice what He has to say to us. That's foundational to being able to live a life with wisdom and to getting the full enjoyment out of this life. That can be very difficult, painful, and trying at times. But God intended to be a life characterized by joy. And we take this relationship with God seriously. We keep our word with Him. Jesus talked about worship in John 4, and we talked about this passage in our previous study as well. God is seeking people to worship Him, but only when they worship Him properly. Jesus said we must worship Him in spirit and truth. It comes from the heart. It's in accord with His Word. Jesus said in His prayer to His Father, your Word is truth. And Jesus also said in John 14:6, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but by me. It is not possible to have a relationship with the living God apart from Jesus Christ and the work He has done on the cross. Until you come to settle that relationship, you can have no relationship with the living God. But when you have, now we come and worship Him. We've joined together today to listen to His Word. And having stressed the importance of our relationship with God, now Solomon continues to carry on talking about our life under the sun. This physical life we live day after day after day. These days. And how we're to live them. And the joy we are to experience in them. As mentioned, God has brought judgment on His creation for the sin of Adam. But He has not taken all the joy out of life. And so Solomon will walk us through in this chapter and then conclude with reminding us of the importance, whether we're poor or whether we're rich, to enjoy each day as God has provided. Look at verse 8. There's going to be a transition here. He's talked about God. He is sovereign over all. But he has appointed human governors, human government leaders in his creation. So you read in verse 8, if you see oppression of the poor and denial of justice and righteousness in the prophets, do not be shocked at the sight. Just jump back to chapter 4, verse 1. This is not new. In chapter 4, verse 1, he said, then I looked at all the acts of oppression which were being done under the sun in this world in which we live. Behold, I saw the tears of the oppressed, that they had no one to comfort them. On the side of the oppressors was power. They had no one to comfort them. We went on to talk about that could be a miserable situation. That's the reality of this life. A sin-cursed world. It could be difficult. It could be unpleasant. It could be unfair. It could be unjust. So when you come over to chapter 5, verse 8, after reminding us that God is sovereign, we acknowledge Him and bow before Him. He says, if you see oppression of the poor, denial of justice and righteousness in the province, do not be shocked at the sight. I mean, that's real life. We understand sin has consequences. And the sin that brought judgment on God's creation has consequences that are ongoing. Don't be shocked at the sight. Then we're told, for one official watches over another official, and there are higher officials over them. So we live in an unfair world, if you could put it that way, in the context of what he's been talking about. There's oppression. There's injustice. There's a lack of righteousness. And some people are treated unfairly. And the lower you are, often the more you get walked on, so to speak, the oppression of the poor. But God has provided a certain order for His creation. You remember when God created Adam and Eve in the garden? I don't even remember. You remember the biblical account. Yes, I did. I understand that. But remember what happened. God created man as male and female. Two people without sin, no sin in His creation of the world at that point. And you know what? He appointed one to be in charge over the other. The man had authority over the woman. There's only two people on the earth. And there's no sin. And God says, one is in charge, the man. We know that. The New Testament tells us that the order of creation established that man would be the leader. He created man first and then the woman. And then in Genesis chapter 2, Adam, the man, named all the animals, showed his authority over that part of creation, and then he named the woman who had been created out of his side, which again is another indication of his authority. All that to not get diverted, but from the very beginning, God established order in His creation. And there it will continue down until today. So there are governing authority. That's what he means in the middle of the verse. One official watches over another official, and there are higher officials over them. That's in the context of this world, which can be unrighteous and unfair. Verse 9. You might read this and say, after all, a king who cultivates the field is an advantage to the land. Say, well, what's the connection? Very simple. These officials are appointed to administer justice. Now, because of sin, some of them will function unfairly, unjustly. But a king who cultivates the field is an advantage to the land. Here's a king who is taking care of his people. Here's a king that's looking out for their welfare and provision for them. So there is oppression, there is a lack of righteousness and justice, but God has ordained authorities for caring for the people. We have that attitude. We talk about those who are governing authorities over us. We say, well, part of their responsibility is to look out for our welfare. And in our society where we vote and so on, they're always telling us that that's why we should vote for them. They are going to do what's best for us. And that's part of the intention of God in providing human government. Just to see the consistency of Ecclesiastes with some other passages. Come back to Proverbs, just before Ecclesiastes, the book of Proverbs. And I've just selected a few verses from Proverbs and then one from the New Testament. There are many. Proverbs chapter 20. Look at verse 8. A king who sits on the throne of justice disperses all evil with his eyes. Literally, he sifts all evil with his eyes. Because if he's functioning as he should, for the good of the people, he's looking to deal with the evil that would be harmful to his people. That's part of a ruler. And that's what human government does. And we're glad for that. We function safely here. I'm glad for governing authorities to keep order in parts of the world where the government has disintegrated and there are no real authorities in charge. No one has peace. No one has safety. But God has ordained authorities for that. So the king here, he is, if he's functioning as he should, a king who sits on the throne of justice, functioning as God intends, he sits out the evil. That should be punished. So come down to verse 26. A wise king winnows the wicked, drives the threshing wheel over them. The picture is of separating the wheat and the chaff. So you winnow that so that the chaff is removed and judged, and the wheat is left, the good. That's what the king is doing. He protects his people and punishes the wicked so that those who murder hopefully get caught and punished. Those who steal get caught and punished. He's dealing with the wicked. That's what rulers are to do so that people can have an orderly and safe life. Come over to chapter 25. Look at verse 5. Take away the wicked before the king, and his throne will be established in righteousness. The king wants to have righteous people around him, and he wants the wicked judged. Then he can have a throne that functions in righteousness. Now again, because of sin, we have imperfect rulers, but even when I traveled in a communist country, I was thankful for the governing authorities. I met with believers who had spent many years in prison for their faith. That was unfair and unjust. But you know what those governing authorities did? They enabled me to walk down the street without fear of being attacked, without somebody robbing me, and so on. So there was order even in that kind of, you say, well, there are things unfair in that government. But the ruling of government, now as Solomon writes, and as a king, the desire that he would have would be to be a godly king and administer God's justice. But even with ungodly rulers, there was an order brought. Come to chapter 29 of Proverbs. Look at verse 4. Those who forsake the law praise the wicked, but those who keep the law strive with them. Evil men do not understand justice, but those who seek the Lord understand all things. I'm reading chapter 28. It's a good chapter, but not what I wanted. Verse 4. I'm looking, where's the word king? Here it is in verse 4 of chapter 29. The king gives stability to the land by justice. A man who takes bribes overthrows it. In other words, and we see this argued in government down to our day. In other words, the king ought to be determined to do what is right, what is just, and not to have his decisions influenced by a bribe. And this has been debated in the government in our very day. You know, was influenced this, he under control of that, did he get a benefit out of this? But if the king, he gives stability by justice. You see an instability, even in our own country, with all the attacks and unsettledness that goes on, and questions about justice. Kind of verse 12. If a ruler pays attention to falsehood, all his ministers become wicked. So you want the best men in charge. Come over to Romans 13 in the New Testament, just one passage. It shows the consistency of what Solomon is writing in Ecclesiastes. Romans 13, we need to read this and remind ourselves regularly as believers. Chapter opens up, every person is to be in subjection to the governing authorities. Basically, that's what Solomon is saying. There's oppression, there's unfairness, there's injustice, there's unrighteousness in the world, but God has established order in government. And one official is over another and gives an account to another and so on. Note here, there is no authority except from God, and those which exist are established by God. You know what? God appoints the time. He appoints the event in the time. He appoints the time for the ruler. He appoints the ruler for the time. You understand, when Paul writes this, there's a man like Nero on the phone. On the phone. Time for vacation. On the throne, without a phone. And the ruler before and after Nero weren't any better. Godless, perverted individuals. You know what he says? Those which exist are established by God. And even in the Roman Empire, with those godless rulers, you know what? There were benefits. There was an unfair judgment offered. Paul was going to be executed under the authority of a Roman ruler that was appointed by God. But the Romans brought peace. The Roman peace. They built roads. Paul could travel from country to country. In certain circumstances, he could claim his Roman citizenship. I was born with Roman citizenship. That gives me rights. That gives me protection. There's not always consistent fairness, but there was order even in that. God had ordained every ruler. Those which exist are established by God. Therefore, whoever resists authority has opposed the ordinance of God. You can't get around this. I respect our president. I respected the president before our president. And the one before that. My age, I've been through a number, as a few of you have. And our responsibility is to recognize this is the man God has appointed for this time. What did Jesus say to Pilate? You would have no authority if it hadn't been given to you from God. Even the man that would condemn him to crucifixion had been put in that position for that time by the hand of God. Paul, anytime he stands before the Roman authorities, he treats them with respect. Most excellent Felix. Not because of his moral character, but because of the position God appointed him. Remember, Daniel told Nebuchadnezzar, God puts in power some of the lowliest, basest of men. Nebuchadnezzar was not a nice man. He had conquered and deported the Jews. What did Jeremiah tell the Jews in their country? Submit to the Babylonians. Be good citizens. Plant fields, build houses. Why? Because God had, for his purpose, at that time, appointed those rulers. So these are for order. We are to recognize that. So you come back to chapter 5, verses 8 and following. There's oppression. There's unfairness. There is unrighteousness. But God has established order. I don't expect that there will, we've already seen, there is oppression. There is unfairness. But that doesn't change the recognition that there are authorities that will bring a certain order. Now, if we're told to do something that's unbiblical, obviously we have to say, I have to do what's biblical. I cannot deny the faith. I cannot go contrary. But I don't have to agree with everything the ruler does, or even the ruler says. And some laws that he passes I wouldn't think are fair. But if I can do it without going contrary to Scripture, I do. Romans 13 went on and said that's why you pay taxes. Jesus had explained that as well. That's part of our responsibility. I don't get to decide how the taxes are used. And they get to decide what the taxes will be. And I am a good citizen. So I want to be careful we don't move out, because when I am not honoring those in power, whatever level, I'm being disobedient to God. So what Solomon says here in a condensed way, and you're benefited by a good ruler who is looking out for you. Basically, verse 9 says, now he moves on to more personal things. So we've moved on from the opening part of chapter 5 to God's authority overall, to recognizing the authorities that represent God. Not necessarily godly people, but represent Him by being appointed as leaders in His creation. Now we're going to talk about the personal responsibility we have, the rich and the poor. And you know what? God's intention is both enjoy life and enjoy the days of their life. That is God's intention. So verses 10 to 20, we're going to talk about wealth and work and a proper attitude toward it all. Verse 10, he who loves money will not be satisfied with money, nor he who loves abundance with his income. This too is vanity. There's our word, heaven. This is breath. We're also reminded of the transitoriness of things. As I've mentioned, some things that are temporary, brief, are worthless. And they're used. You take a piece of paper, you use it to start a fire, the paper burns up. That was temporary, and it's worthless. Burned to ashes. It served its purpose. But not everything temporary is worthless. Money is not worthless. The love of money leads you into a trap. But remember, this is all temporary. So the love of money is foolishness, because you can't be satisfied with money. And if that's the focus of your life, you won't find satisfaction no matter how much you have. Aside, I was reading this week of a multi-billionaire who bought another home. $80 billion. That's a lot more than my house. One place. And it's one of half a dozen homes he has. The last one I think he bought was $34 million. He still has it. Why do you need all that? You're never satisfied. Just left one wife and involved with another woman. It just, well, you got all this money. What do? Well, buy homes, move on in relationships. Wouldn't you just be satisfied with what you have? We're never. And if that is your love, the focus of your life, it doesn't mean this is true of everyone who has an abundance. But if this is your love, this is the focus of your life, this is what the world offers. All you do, watch the advertisements telling you how to be sure to have enough, how to be sure you get more, how to, they say to me, they say, how do you know you'll have enough to retire? How? And we're not going to get wise, but the world is absorbed with now and the things. Money doesn't satisfy, and it's just a breath. Just a breath. I mean, you don't understand. You don't invest your life in a snowball. The sun's coming up. It's not going to be there. It's a breath. If you love money, you won't be satisfied with it. You can't satisfy the heart. Who, come back to chapter 2, verse 25, who can eat and have enjoyment without God? So, the love of money. We're familiar with that emphasis. We'll say more in a moment. But look how he explains it. The more you get, the more you need, the more you want. By paraphrase. When good things increase, those who consume them increase. So what is the advantage to their owners except to look on? You know, it does. I remember, tells you how old I am, thinking one time, boy, if I could ever make $10,000 a year, that would be enough to live comfortably. I'm glad I didn't make that a vow. That I would promise God that I would live on $10,000. Because what? Things increase. You know, inflation comes, taxes come, you know, families grow, the business grows, you got more expenses with the business, you got whatever it is. So when good things increase, those who consume them increase. So in that sense, you don't have an advantage, you just get to watch it. You know, it gets used. But that's not saying there's not advantage to it. He's going to say, yeah. Later in Ecclesiastes, we'll be told that money is the answer to everything. We'll have to put that in context. So if you have your focus on money, and that's what you're living for, you know, it'll be gone. It's all temporary. And your expenses will grow, whether it's taxes, whether it's family responsibilities, whether it's business responsibilities, you know, things get eaten up and used up. Then he talks about the contrast. Not everybody will have a lot. The sleep of the working man is pleasant, whether he eats little or much. But the full stomach of the rich man does not allow him to sleep. We know. I don't want that to be misunderstood. I was going to say, thank the Lord for antacids. But we are a society that keeps advertising antacids. They keep telling you this antacid. Oh, there you go, there you go. The poor man's working hard, eats little, and goes to bed, and he's so tired from his labor, and he doesn't have a full stomach. How many times have you gone to bed and said, oh, I wish I hadn't ate that before we went to bed? Or you're going out there and say, well, I don't know if I want to eat that. It's getting close to bedtime. You know, those kind of things. It does. The good life. Now, I realize the poor person who had nothing to eat may be awake with an empty stomach. But the point here is the contrast between a working man who just makes enough to get by and the rich man who has an abundance. He can maybe not always in a position to enjoy his abundance. There is a grievous evil, and he'll go on to mention the evil. But understand the point. Your life on money. Don't fall in love with money. We'll look at some other verses in a moment. But that's consistent with the Scripture. We can enjoy the things of this life. You know, he's not condemning a person for being poor. He's not condemning a person for being rich. But there can be benefits and problems on either side. Some people that have very little are very satisfied and sleep well at night. And some people with money are up at night because they have a lot of things to worry about. I mean, it's the difference between owning the business and working in the business. You know, work the business, I work the day, I can go home and relax and enjoy it. I own the business, I got to see, are we making money? Can I pay the bill? All these things. So the pros and the cons are what he is talking about there. It is all a breath. Look at verses 13 and 14. He continues this same idea. There is a grievous evil which I've seen under the sun. Riches being hoarded by their owner to his hurt. In other words, here's a man who is what we call a workaholic, which I realize is a subjective term. For some people these days, if you work more than 15 hours a week, you're a workaholic, I think. But here's a person who spends his life, he's consumed. I don't have enough. I won't have enough. I have to work harder, work longer hours, have more. He's working to his hurt, to acquire. He's hoarding things. When those riches were lost through a bad investment, something went wrong. He fathered a son, there was nothing to support him. That's an evil. We don't have control over things. They're out of our control. And they're all a breath. So some people who thought they would have a lot, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, you've read his Cost of Discipleship, was imprisoned in World War II and executed there, German. But he said in Germany his father had saved his whole life for retirement. But what happened in Germany in the devaluation of currency? He said his total retirement was only enough to buy a cake and a bottle of wine to celebrate his retirement. That was it. It was gone. Don't know. You can't have control. How many people have thought, whatever happens. So here, he can't pass anything on to his children because he has nothing. Just an example of how things are transitory. And you don't have control over it. People lost money in the stock market. They lost money to con men who lured them into investing what they shouldn't invest. Or they did. The point is, they end up with nothing. What he's going to do is remind people that this is the condition of life. Before we go on, come over to Matthew 6. Jesus spoke about this in the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew chapter 6, verse 19. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy, where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves do not break in or steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. That doesn't say you can't have more. I mean, some will have more. But that, you have to be careful. You know, the John Wesley statement, whenever I have extra money, I quickly give it away, lest it find its way from my pocket to my heart. And that's the danger. You know, we live in a prosperous society, and we're not careful. We start out working hard so we'll have enough and want to pretty soon, you know, we're controlled by that. And then we're controlled by trying to preserve what we have. And then we get concerned by the worries and concern that what we have won't be enough. And we're constantly bombarded with the question, will you have enough? Can you be sure? Maybe you ought to. And we know that our best was in heaven. Solomon didn't develop quite that way, but what did he start out chapter 5 with? Reminding us, you fear God. You honor Him. And that's a recognition He is sovereign. My life is in His hands. Verse 24, Jesus said, no man can serve two masters. Then he goes on, verse 25, do not be worried about your life. And he gives examples, even using Solomon. Verse 29, then verse 31, don't worry then about life. We can summarize it. Seek first His kingdom, His righteousness, all these things we worry, be added to you. Excuse me. Do not worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow will care for itself. Excuse me. Each day has enough trouble of its own. That doesn't mean you don't make any plans for tomorrow. But it's like Solomon said, you have no control over tomorrow. Life is temporary. He's going to go on to conclude this chapter when we get there. Enjoy each day. And, you know, remember, a handful of rest and a handful of work is better than two handfuls of work. God intends us to enjoy this life under the sun. I'm not waiting just to enjoy life when I get to heaven. I'm also taking time to enjoy each day. presently, because God said that I'm to do that. And that's where we're going, and it's what Jesus said. Each day has enough trouble of its own. It doesn't mean I can't plan, and we all have to plan. If you get a paycheck, then you have to, plan to be able to pay the bills until your next paycheck and buy food and that. I'm not talking about that. But I don't live my life worried about tomorrow, concerned. Then I don't enjoy today. How many people have missed the joy of today because they were absorbed? Then they look back and say, oh, I wish I had taken little breaks. I wish I had taken the time to do this. I wish I hadn't been so driven for that. But I can't go back. Again, we're not talking about living for pleasure. And we'll see this as we go on. Come back to Ecclesiastes, chapter 5. Verse 15, the reality of it all, for the rich and the poor. As he had come naked from his mother's womb, so will he return as he came. He will take nothing from the fruit of his labor that he can carry in his hand. This is also a grievous evil. I mean, this is one of the troubles that sin brought into the world. Death! So my life is temporary. And everything I have and everything I do is temporary. And that's not good. The last enemy that would be destroyed is death. I mean, this is a reality. It's the reality of life. That is a grievous evil. You spend your whole life working, and we've had this already through Ecclesiastes. A king can work hard, do all that, and then he has a foolish son, and Solomon did. And he wasted what Solomon had accomplished and split the kingdom and so on. And you know what? Death is going to overtake us all. That's why it's all temporary. By loving money, why would you fall in love with a snowball that's going to melt as soon as the heat comes up? It's all temporary. That's the reality, the wisdom to live life. This should not be depressing for us as believers, because we do know where we're going. But we also know this is the day the Lord has made. We will rejoice and be glad in tomorrow. No, we will be gracious and be glad in it. To experience what God has for us today, because we're going to die and take nothing. So what is the advantage to him who toils for the wind? Here comes the wind again. The wind itself is temporary. It blows, it doesn't blow. I looked out the window this morning and said, boy, the wind is really blowing. We may go out afterwards and it's died down. It's a temporary thing and it's uncontrollable. So, you only think you're in control. Oh boy, I've saved up a lot. I've done this, I've done that. I know my kids will be set. I'm not saying we can't plan for, but the reality of it, we have no control. We're going to talk about Venezuela, how it went from the wealthiest country down there to the poorest. What would it take for our country to make such a turn? Wake up in the morning and all of a sudden our money's not worth anything. I mean, that I won't. Well, whatever happens, we're not in control. That's the point. Our life is short. We won't take anything when we leave this life. We didn't bring anything in. We won't take anything out. It's not written to be depressing. Face reality. That's life. And today is the day we have. Even in glory, I won't have today. I have today to live for the Lord. I have today to do what I should do before Him and to experience the joy He's provided for me today. When this day's gone, it will be gone. That's what Solomon is writing about. We can't make it. Back up to Job. This is consistent with the Scripture, as those of you who are familiar with the Scripture are well aware. But Job, chapter 1. And Job's losing it all. But in verse 21 he said, naked I came from my mother's womb. Job 1:21. And naked I shall return there. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. He sees the hand of God in it, but he doesn't blame God as though God did something wrong. So it's not wrong to have things, to be blessed with abundance, but hold them lightly. Would I love the Lord with the same depth of love if he took it all away tomorrow? Would I feel my life has been shattered and be without value if he took it all away tomorrow? Well, he's appointed the time, he's appointed the events. Lord, let me find joy and satisfaction even in this. Jump to 1 Timothy. There's some other verses, but we'll have to overlook them. But 1 Timothy 6, I just want you to see the consistency of this emphasis in the Word. 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 6. But God, and remember, Paul's writing this 1,000 years after Solomon has passed away and written Ecclesiastes. Godliness is a means of great gain when accompanied by contentment. Remember, Ecclesiastes 2:25, who can have joy and contentment without him? Godliness is a means of great gain when accompanied by contentment. We brought nothing into the world, we can take nothing out of it. If we have food and covering, with these we shall be content. Those who want to get rich fall into temptation. That's what Solomon said. Love of money, the love of possessions. They fall into a snare, many foolish, harmful desires which plunge men into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is the root of all sorts of evil. Not the money, but the love of it. When it begins to take over my heart. And you know what? It's a sad thing here. Some by longing for it have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. We as Christians have to be careful. Prosperity has its own traps. It has a way of locking on to me. And I'm used to the good life. My mother used to joke and say, I've been poor and I've had more. Having more is better. And there's an element that we all agree. I'm glad I live in a country of prosperity. I don't wish I lived as I see some people having to live in parts of the world. I thank God for the blessing that I enjoy. But I don't want that to become the focus of my heart. And if he takes it all away, like Job said, I hope I can say, blessed be the name of the Lord. He gave, he took away. He's done what is good. He's done what is best. Come back to Ecclesiastes 5. This person, verse 16, he toils for the wind. Throughout his life he eats in darkness with great vexation, sickness, and anger. I mean, you devoted your life to something that's temporary, now it's gone. Or you're gone and it's left. You end up in the same place. What you have doesn't last. That's why he says back in chapter 4, verse 6, one handful of rest is better than 2 fists full of labor. And the control of the wind, it comes and it goes, and you have no control. That's that same emphasis. You spent your life and you didn't take time to enjoy it. So verses 18 to 20 talk about, and it's not heathenism, but it's basic fact. In all the toils and labors and all the good things, enjoy every day. Whether you're poor, whether you're rich, enjoy the days of your life. Here is what I have seen to be good and fitting. That word fitting. You have a note, little one card, you look in the mark, it says beautiful. We saw that word back in verse 11 of chapter 3. He has made everything appropriate. You know, you have that little number 1 there. In the margin, it's literally beautiful. He made everything beautiful in its time. Verse 18 of chapter 5, here is what I have seen to be good and beautiful. They're not talking about miserable, senseless. Reading one of the new commentaries on Ecclesiastes this week, and he thinks the best translation for this word translated vanity is senseless. It's senseless. But here he says, I've seen what to be good and beautiful, to eat, to drink, to enjoy oneself in all one's labor, in which he toils. Don't say there won't be labor, there won't be toil under the sun. The few days of his life which God has given him. Enjoy the days of your life. They are few, and they will soon be gone. That's not to be depressing, unless you don't have the privilege of walking day by day in fellowship with the living God and are prepared to meet Him in judgment, as He will emphasize particularly as we close this book in chapter 12. But believer, enjoy the days. This is good and beautiful. Go out and have lunch. Go home and have a peanut butter sandwich. But sit down and relax, enjoy it. Enjoy oneself in all your labors and toils. Nobody doesn't say you have to wait until the labor and toil is done. Even the days you're working in, go home and relax. And take a day off, or do something you enjoy. Under the sun, the few, and that word years is literally the days. I like days better because it reminds you every day. There are few days when you look at them overall of the life which God has given. You note His sovereignty in this. This is what God has given. Eat, drink, enjoy yourself in the labor and toil which God has given. These are things that God intended. He didn't suck all the joy out of it. And now you're a stage of life where you can relax more, you have to labor less. Thank the Lord. Now don't forget Him. We have to be careful that our pleasure doesn't squeeze out the Lord and we have less and less time for Him. But we can enjoy our days as we walk in obedience to the Lord. This is His reward. Don't me God wants me to be gloomy and think I'm leading a meaningless life. He just told me my reward for labor and toil here is to eat, drink, enjoy yourself in your labors. Not live for that, but take time to enjoy life. Furthermore, for every man, and note the emphasis in this verse, furthermore, for every man to whom God has given. Let's repeat it. This is God's plan. This is God's will. This is God's reward. To whom God has given riches and wealth. So if God has given you riches and wealth, thank Him for His gift. Every good gift and every perfect act, good act of giving comes down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow caused by turning, James tells us. He has given it to Him. He has also empowered him to eat from them, and to receive His reward and rejoice in His labor. What His labor is provided. This is the gift of God. So no matter whether you're the laborer and the one who has to seem to grind it out every day, or you're the man who has it, you each have the privilege of enjoying what you have. And if I don't have as much as someone else has, I want to enjoy my days with what God has given me. I don't want to miss the joy of my day because I'm living in envy that I don't have what the rich man has. And the rich man doesn't have to feel guilty for having, unless he attained it improperly. But God has given riches and wealth. And they don't have to live the same as someone. He should enjoy it. You'll know. He has empowered him to eat from them and to receive His reward and rejoice in His labor. This is the gift of God. You'll know both verse 18 and 19. The laborer, the working laborer, and the wealthy rich. Both are to do what? Enjoy their days. The few days. with the temporary transitory things you have, a little or much. This is the gift of God. It's a reward. Thankfully, He didn't suck all the joy, squeeze all the pleasure out of life because of sin. And now, for those who fear Him, He wants them to enjoy the life they're living. For He will not often consider the years of his life, because God keeps him occupied with the gladness of his heart. That's the way it is. You know, I'm getting near being old. Note how as you get older, you keep talking about old people as though they were somebody ahead. You know, we're not to stop and think, well, what's the average age of a man? Average age, they die at about 77. I'm 76. Boy, I better go home and start cleaning up and, no. You know, God's intention is you enjoy the days you have. If you die tomorrow, you'll be glad you enjoyed today. And if you have 2 more days, enjoy them. And that's part of God's plan. He will not consider the days of his life. Because God keeps him occupied with the gladness of his heart. I don't know where they get this gloominess in Ecclesiastes. I'm supposed to have a glad heart that enables me to enjoy the days. This is what God has. And He provides that kind of joy and gladness. So I'm not thinking, oh, I'm running out of life. I got to do this, I got to do that. No. Enjoy the days today. And be careful. Plan for retirement. I don't have any problem with that. But don't miss the joy of today because you're trying to sock it all away tomorrow. I remember my dad, and I've shared this, but the night before I was going to get married, we sat down at the table for a father and son talk, which meant my father talked, and I listened. And he said, I want you to know, do not expect one more dime from me. I raised you, I fed you, I clothed you, and I provided a house. Don't expect another dime. If I decide sometime to give you something, that'll be my decision. Don't expect me to leave you anything. So I went away, depressed, rethinking my marriage. No, that was fine. It was good. And that doesn't mean he didn't give me things, and he did. And it doesn't mean he didn't leave things. But it was a good reminder. And you know what? He should enjoy what he had. The days he had. And anything left over, then fine. So I'm trying to spend everything Marilyn and I have so there's nothing to replace. I know that wasn't one of my kids clapping. Ecclesiastes, I find it, I'm glad I'm studying Ecclesiastes for myself. You know, God, it's nice to hear God saying, I don't want to feel guilty. You know, taking vacation or going things that enjoy life. I don't want to replace serving the Lord in one way or another, but I'm glad I can take time. I'm glad I can go enjoy something, a meal or whatever we can do. So if you don't know the Lord, you ought to come to know Him. It'll put joy in your life. Because He produces joy in the heart, and you'll see life, even in its miseries, differently. That's what Paul saying. There'll be bad days. There'll be oppressing days. There'll be unfair days. There'll be days. That's right. It's all temporary. And find joy in each day. And that's God's reward. Let's pray together. Thank you, Lord, for the riches of your word. You are a good God, a gracious God, a loving God. Lord, we are undeserving of anything from you. But you in love and mercy and kindness provide the salvation for us to rescue us from our hopelessness, our miserableness, our lostness. And in that salvation, you have brought to us new life. Lord, thank you for your word, which instructs us on how to live life with wisdom, skillfully. Lord, our hearts are encouraged as we're reminded that you intend for us to enjoy the days of our lives. They are few. This life is temporary. Everything connected with it is temporary. But that's not discouraging. These are days for us to enjoy, to profit from, to experience your blessings. So we commit the day before us even today to you in Christ's name. Amen. Thank you. Have a good day.